Hi, good evening, and welcome back to the daily Rambam She'ar, 3 chapters per day. Lesson 221, Hilchois She'ar Avot haTum'ah from chapter 12 until 14. Since we are approaching the Chag HaGeula and Rosh Hashanah LeChasidus Yutes Kislev, one of the famous explanation of the Rabbi regarding the question, how come if Chassidus is so important, it was not revealed generations before? And one of the answers that he anoisenes, when there is a fine weather outside, a person is not required to equip himself with many layers of clothes. But when there is cold, it's frozen outside, it's dark outside, a person must to be equipped with so many layers and so many means that in normal times are not necessary. In fact, we see an interesting precedent that the amount of takonois, gzeiros, minhogois, and customs, decrees, safety guards, which introduced after the destruction of the temple and the presence of Golus, were way more than those institutions that were practiced before the actual exile took place, which again illustrate a certain point that the more a person is in a challenging situation, so in order to survive and to maintain his spiritual existence, he must to take advantage all means possible, those means that their scholars were introducing. And in fact, right now, the subject of the Rambam today's and the upcoming days is different decrees which were introduced in a context of Tumo and Taharo in order to safeguard and to protect the status of the food, the Trumois, the Kodoshim, the sacred food, which were common to be exposed to a danger of impurity, so different decrees were given. In fact, the Rabbi in one of the Sichos, he makes an interesting note regarding the amount of gzeiros and chumros happens to be summed up in the number 11. 11 severities which were counted by the scholars and giving a extra weight to kodesh, to sacred food, over trumo. Those type of food that were in a connection of the offerings which used to be brought in the Beis HaMikdash, ranging from chatois, shlomim, and ashomis, the type of food which or the kohanim or the owners of the korban themselves were consuming. So the 11th one, we're going to summarize the first chumro, the first severity, safety guard that were taken. While it is okay to immerse in the mikveh a utensil inside a utensils, despite the fact that the external utensils may have a very narrow opening, when it comes to kodesh, to sacred food, it is forbidden at all. The reason, since there is always a possibility that if I will give a permission, eventually it will be less than shveiferes hanoid, which is a diameter of about a few inches wide, in order to bring it in, and that way the internal vessel is not going to be immersed in the water of the mikveh, it will be immersed in the water of the external vessel, and for that reason it was forbidden altogether when it comes to kodesh to dip, to immerse in the mikveh a kli, a vessel inside a vessel. Another chumrah number 2 is when the haTum'ah, the impurity, is affecting the outside of the vessel, while in haTum'ah it's not going to have any impact for the contents of the vessel. When it comes to Kodesh, it will impact the contents of the vessel as well. Severity number 3. When a person is carrying any type of furniture which made for sitting or sleeping, that a zav, a person who has a discharge from his body and therefore he is impure. So when generally a person is carrying such a vessel in one hand and a basket of haTum'ah without direct contact to the contents of the basket, so while the person himself, he is tomei as a result of carrying a mishkav, a instrument that a zav laid, nevertheless, on a content of a haTum'ah, he won't be able to impact haTum'ah, impurity for the haTum'ah, since the haTum'ah is not going to be contaminated via maso, via carrying. The haTum'ah will be contaminated only with a direct contacts. However, when a person carries a kodesh in the other hand, so he will be able to transmit haTum'ah to the kodesh. Severity number 4. When the garments of people who are eating haTum'ah, they will be considered for people who are involved in kodesh as a midros. Midros is a impure object that will affect their ability to access kodoshim. Severity number 5, regarding the immersing of a kli, of a vessel which is made out of few vessels. If a vessel has a function and it happens to be screwed for many pieces, so when it comes to haTum'ah, I can immerse him the way it is and it will be fine for haTum'ah consumption. If this vessel is designated for kodesh, that's not going to be enough. I will need to unscrew all the pieces and immerse each and every piece of the utensils separately, and only then use it for the purpose of kodesh. Number 6, any type of vessel that was done in pure condition, you still gotta go and immerse the kli if you are interested to use it for kodesh. The suspicion that there is always a possibility there are saliva of ha'amoretz may have reached the vessel while the completion was done. Homer number 7 is the ability for the vessel to combine all its contents. In fact, there is a remez, it's being alluded to it in the Torah, where it says, Kaf achas asor zohov meleyok toires, that when there is different object in a kli, just the fact that though they are not connected to each other, they being parked in separate areas of the kli, nevertheless, since they are in use of kodesh, the kli is combining them. Sometimes there can be another object between them that will be able to separate them. The general rule, what type of object is capable to make a separation between the two piles of foods? If this type of object is dependent upon the kli, so therefore it will be considered a part of the kli and won't be able to separate between them. If, however, if it is independent even without the kli, then it will be able to make a chatzitzo and separate between the object that are in the kli. A 8 severity when it comes to Kodesh, the ability to bring on and transmit the haTum'ah till 4th generations, which means while when it comes to haTum'ah, the object that touched the source of haTum'ah will be Rishon in the haTum'ah, the object that touched him will be second, and the object that touched the second will be Shlishi, and this is the end of it. When it comes to Kodesh, there is an extra generation that if another object touched the one that is Shlishi l'tumah, the final object will be Revi'i l'tumah, and this is a severity exists only in Kodesh. The 9 severity, when a person happens to be in one hand, it is moist and it is wet with any type of liquid, though this hand have not touched the other hand, nevertheless the other hand will be tomei. This severity exists only in Kodesh and not in haTum'ah, because in haTum'ah it is in order to transmit haTum'ah you gotta actually touch the other hand. The 10th severity is the need for any type of oichel, including haTum'ah, in order to be affected of haTum'ah, it must be muchsho, it must be pre-qualified, and the pre-qualification for haTum'ah is the contact of liquids with the food. Theoretically, any type of foods that never was exposed to any liquids, so even if an avel or a sheretz or any form of haTum'ah touched it, the food will remain tohir. In order to be able to impact haTum'ah on any type of foods must be a prerequisite for the food to be exposed and be wetted with water, and only then, if it was in touch with a haTum'ah, the sheretz or nevela or mess or any type of haTum'ah will be able to transmit. But when it comes to any food that belongs to Kodesh, sacred food, so then even without pre-qualification of any contact with water, they were already will be able to become tomei by just coming in touch. The reason, chibas hakodesh, the specialty or the sympathy of Kodesh will extend the alternative of pre-qualification for haTum'ah. And here is the final one, and this is regarding a mechusor kippurim. A mechusor kippurim is an individual that belongs for one of those 4 categories, Zov, Onido, and Yuledes, which we have covered a few times in the past. Though that they were already finished, completed their purification process, and they brought already their korbanos, nevertheless, before they are about to eat anything that Kodesh, they must have an additional tvilo to be immersed in the mikveh. The reason, there is always a suspicion of destruction. Amongst the severities, the first 6 severities, they are relevant also to chulin, which were done on Taharas HaKodesh. The other 5, they are only by Kodesh. Chulin, it means a practice that were done by many pious people, though they were consuming and eating food which were not sacred, nevertheless, they imposed upon themselves voluntarily all the restrictions that generally practiced within a context of Kodesh. The second chapter deals about the special qualities when it comes to garments. Garments in generally, they are due to a decree of rabbinical decree, which is based upon the suspicion, as we have said, that a zav may come in touch with them, or by having his saliva or any other liquids, or by actually using them as a mishkov, as a sitting, or a merkov. So for that reason, they imposed a presumption of any type of garment that will be tomei, based upon the following scale. The first stage in this latter will be chulin, which is normal food, not labeled as tu'umah or kodesh. The second level is oichlei meiser sheni, people who are eating the meiser sheni in Yerushalayim in a state of tahara. The higher level is oichlei tu'umah, people who eat tu'umah. The fourth level is the oichlei kadoshim, people who are eating the sacred food of the korbanos. And the fifth and the highest level is those people who are dealing and getting involved with the water of chatos, which is the water that were mixed with the ashes of the red heifer. Each and every one of those levels will have their garments viewed as midras from a perspective of a higher level. Example, the garments of people who are oichlei chulin, from a perspective of oichlei meiser sheni, the garments of oichlei chulin will be viewed as medras. And the garments of oichlei meiser sheni will be viewed as medras to those people who are oichlei truma, and so on. Another severity that was introduced is the need to have a kavono, a intention, when a person immerses himself into the mikveh, except when a person is about to eat chulin, that doesn't need any kavono at all. Since biblically there is no need for kavona, just the fact a person immersed himself in the mikveh, biblically and midoraisa, it will be fine. But as part of those severities that were introduced rabbinically, even if a person had a kavono, but he had the intention for a lower degree of purity, so though it was effective for that particular degree of purity that he was about to prepare himself, but in comparison to a higher level of purity, he is still considered tomei. Additional subject that is being covered is the problem of hesech hadas. Hesech hadas, loosely translated, is distraction. When a person was losing concentration and was distracted, he is required to go again and immerse himself a second time. And when comes to even a kodesh, even if a person had a kavono, was not distracted regarding the tumo, but he was distracted in regarding to a kodesh, he is required to go for a second tevilo. However, though a tevilo is necessary, but he still will be exempt from ha'arev shemesh, from the sunset, because they limited their decree and they made a hekel. If a person was in such a level of destruction that it's not even clear for him 100% whether he was exposed to tumah or not only that he was losing destruction about tumo or kodesh, but he is in fact in a doubtful state whether he was exposed to tumah or not, then he will need ha'arev shemesh, sunset, as well. Another decree is regarding those utensils a person finds on the street. They are presumed to be tomei, except Yerushalayim. Even if a person found a vessel in Yerushalayim, since they have not expanded this particular decree of Yerushalayim due to the consideration of the need of people for the korbonos and so on, so there is no gzeiro, there is no decree upon those utensils which were found on the street of Yerushalayim. But even in Yerushalayim, there is still a special severity regarding the knives that are being found on the street throughout the year. Because chumras hakodoshim, the possibility that a knife may be tomei, which in return will disqualify the korban and makes it pasul. For that reason, they left the decree of presuming that the knives will be tomei if a person found a knife which is qualified fit for shchito in Yerushalayim. But even then, there is one exception of the decree when it comes to Erev Pesach. The need for the korban Pesach, the mitzvah, which is a mitzvah sasei associated with koles, and due to the general consideration that Pesach is a time when people are purifying themselves for the Pesach, for that reason they left the gzeiro alone only on, which means they have eliminated the gzeiro on Erev Pesach. So throughout the year, they have a gzeiro even in Yerushalayim, even on knives, but when it comes to Erev Pesach, those knives are exempt from the gzeiro, and a person can use them to slaughter his korban Pesach. Same way throughout a Yom Tov, any Yom Tov. If a person found a knife in Yerushalayim, he will be able to slaughter. The reason, because generally, Boregel, at the time of the holiday, each and every one purifies and puts himself in a pure condition for the holiday. Any type of saliva that are being found in Jerusalem, some of them will be pure and some of them will presume that there is tomei. And the location and timing will depend. Throughout the year, those salivas who are on the side roads will be considered pure, since the side road throughout the year was the place where those purushim, the people who are careful, walked by, and the center of the road was the path where the crowd, which amongst them were Amei Ha'oretz, and as we have learned before, they are suspects and presumed to be tomei. Yerushalayim, however, the primary walkers in the center of the street, they are presumed for the above mentioned reason to be tohir, and only on the side roads when were walking those people that they were tomei. Tumo or kodoshim, that they were contaminated, they became impure only because of a sofek, on a doubt of any haTum'ah of Torah. Even though they are based on a doubt, nevertheless, if they come in contact with kodoshim, I will burn the kodoshim. However, if it is a sfek sfeiko, it is a double doubt, I won't burn, I won't consume, because there is always a suspicion that maybe it is Tomei, but there is no reason for it to burn. The example, one example amongst many, if a person were impacted by the sand of Beis HaPras. Beis HaPras is a field where a grave was plowed in those graves, and there is always the reason they were imposed haTum'ah upon such a field, because there is always a possibility, there is always a doubt that maybe part of the dead person is mixed in the sand. If a person is doubtful whether he touched such a sand, it is sfek sfeiko. Sofek number one, he is doubtful whether he touched the sand or not. Doubt number two, even if he did touch the sand, it is not clear whether indeed in the sand that he actually touching a piece or a trace of a dead person is actually mixed in it. The third chapter is dealing with different doubts that the scholars in fact purified in the sense they viewing it as it is tohil without any problems, and they are reaching the amount of 12. Some of them we will learn today, and some of them will continue the upcoming days. The first doubt that the scholars introduced a very lenient approach is regarding Mayim She'uvim. We have learned yesterday that those waters which are not directly at their body of water, like a river, lake, or a mikveh, but they were actually drawn into a kli, into a vessel, via a human involvement. So, if it is those waters in the amount of 3 lugin, which is about 2 liters, were mixed in a mikveh which is less than 40 so, and they were helping to complete the amount of 40 so, such a Mayim She'uvim will disqualify the mikveh. So if there is a doubt whether the water, which are Mayim She'uvim, were helping to complete this Arboim so or not, it was not clear whether it was less than Arboim so or so on. So any type of a doubt in regard to Mayim She'uvim will be tohil. Nevertheless, I would still suggest him to purify his vessels somewhere else. But after the fact, if he have purified his vessels there, they will be considered tohil. A second sofek that Chachamim have took and applied a lenient approach when there is a flooding to haTum'ah upon the water, and there is no clarity whether a person who was in the process of immersing in this water, he was actually touching the haTum'ah or not. As long as the haTum'ah was floating right on top of the water, then the person will be presumed tohil. But in order to define the haTum'ah as a haTum'ah tzofo, it must be directly contacted right above the water. In case that was any separate item between the water and the haTum'ah, in such a case, the presumption, the privilege of the leniency is not there any longer. The privilege as well, it is limited only to a haTum'ah of sheretz only. The same way that Chachamim were metahel any type of a floating tumah, they were also purifying a floating taharo. Example, if there is a piece of bread covered with a paper, and in a certain stage, this bread, which is tumah, which is a pure and holy type of bread, the part of the paper that wraps it fell, however, the bottom still there. So there is a very layer of a paper underneath the pure bread, and it's floating in a bucket that the walls of the bucket are tumah. Now, since it is in a state of floating, so, and we have said before that any type of tzofo, anything of in a floating state, I will take the lenient approach. So in this case, though that it was floating inside a tumah, impure vessel, nevertheless, I will assume that it was not touching the walls and remain tohil. Further than this, sometimes sherets can be found in the area of the wine press, in the pit where the wine is there. So, as far as the wine will be tumah. As far as the workers working on this wine, I will assume that they are tohil, since the cause, the source of this tumah is a tumah tzofo, and the question whether they have touched this tumah that was floating or not, and anything that is floating will be assumed that it is lenient ruling, that it is tohil. The third suffix is regarding any liquids. So when it comes to liquids, regarding their ability to bring upon another object tumah, I will take the lenient approach. However, if an object that is tumah was questioned whether he brought upon tumah upon the liquid, then the approach will be a severe one. Example, if a person happens to have a water on his stick that is dripping, he happens to have a stick and the bottom of the stick is wet and has many drops, he took and threw the stick towards the area where there are many holy breads. And the doubt over here, if this contaminated impure water have touched the breads or not. Since the issue over here, the ability of the mashkin, of the liquids, to bring upon tumah to a foreign object, so the ruling will be a lenient one and the foreign object will remain tohil. If it is the opposite, a person who actually threw a impure breads towards the liquids and it is not clear whether the impure bread have touched them or not, then I will presume and take the severe approach and I will assume that touch them and they will be tumah. The fourth doubt that they took the lenient approach as well is regarding the status of the yodayim, of the hands. Both ways, regarding their ability to bring upon tumah upon others or to become tumah from others. In both cases, I will take the lenient approach. Example, if a person has both of his hands pure and in front of him there is two breads which are impure, there is doubt whether he touched them or not. As long as it is in a state of a doubt, both of his hands are tohil. It goes even further. He happens to have both of his hands are impure. Now it is and he went ahead and purified them, whether via a tvilo, immersing them in water, or via netilo, pouring the water upon them. Then there is a doubt whether the water were kosher in the sense their size, their quantity, their coverage, their any other issues that may arise. Whatever the doubt will be, unless proven otherwise, the presumption that it will be tohil. Thank you very much.